Hi there, and welcome. Tonight's bedtime story takes you deep beneath the waves. Have you ever wondered what really happened to the lost city of Atlantis? Was it a powerful kingdom swallowed by the sea, or something far more mysterious? Close your eyes, relax, and get ready to drift off as we explore the secrets and legends of an ancient world that vanished without a trace. This is the story of Atlantis, and you might never look at the ocean the same way again. Chapter 1: The Ocean That Remembers. Long before the pyramids were raised or the first stones of Babylon were laid, there was Atlantis. Not the Atlantis you have heard of in passing, not merely an island swallowed by sea. No, the true Atlantis was something far older, stranger, and more beautiful than the stories remember. It was not one island but 10, linked like pearls on a necklace across the heart of the Atlantic Ocean. And in the center of them all stood the shining capital, Poseidon. They say the ocean never forgets, and deep beneath the waves, in the stillness between currents, the bones of that lost empire sleep. But before the waves claimed it, Atlantis was a place of wonder. Imagine marble towers kissed by sunlight and crowned with crystal domes that caught the stars. Rivers of silver ran through her cities. Bridges of light stretched across chasms. Gardens bloomed in impossible shapes, with flowers that sang when touched by the breeze. The people called themselves the Atlani. Tall, golden-skinned, eyes like sea glass, they walked with the poise of those who had never known war. But perfection is a mask, and masks can crack. Chapter 2: The House of the Deep Flame. At the heart of Poseidon rose a mountain crowned with a temple, the House of the Deep Flame. This was no ordinary sanctuary. It was a library, a laboratory, and a lighthouse for the soul of Atlantis. Within its walls was the core crystal, a living flame said to be a gift from the stars, older than the earth. It powered the light bridges, the healing chambers, the floating palaces. It responded to thought, to will, to harmony. And it was cared for by the keepers, a sacred order of priest scientists trained from birth to protect balance. Kalen, the youngest keeper in 100 years, often felt the weight of that title. Only 23, he had been chosen not for lineage, but for resonance, his mind aligned with the core like no other. Some whispered that he could hear it speak, and lately it had started to whisper louder. Chapter 3: Omens and Reflections. Atlantis was at its height, but Kalen had noticed things others missed. The light bridges flickered when they should not. Storms gathered along the outer aisles where skies had once been calm. A flock of crystal-winged swans had veered from their usual migration and flown north into the unknown. He brought his concerns to the High Empress, Lysara, a ruler of unmatched grace, with hair like woven moonlight and a voice that could still a room. She had ruled for 2 centuries, held in youth by the harmonics of the core. Change, she said gently, pouring seaberry tea, is the nature of the world. Even Atlantis must breathe. This is not a breath, Kalen replied. It is a warning. She touched his hand. Then listen, but do not let fear twist what you hear. He bowed, but the unease stayed with him. Chapter 4: Beneath the Crystal Mirror. In secret, Kalen descended into the forbidden levels beneath the temple. There, The core crystal floated in a chamber of silence, pulsing with slow, ancient light. He sat before it, eyes closed. He did not speak. He simply listened. And then, in the depths of his mind, he felt it. A sorrow like waves crashing against memory. Images of a shattered dome, of stars blackened by smoke, of water, so much water, rising like a beast. "It is not too late," the core whispered, "but the wound grows." Kalen opened his eyes. He was not alone. A woman stood behind him, cloaked in starlight, eyes like voids. "You seek truth," she said, "but truth has a price." Then she was gone. Chapter 5. The Game of Circles. Far from Poseidar on the outer isle of Dalen, a different kind of power stirred. Not all Atlantean believed in harmony. The Circle of Thorns, a group of rogue philosophers and elementalists, believed that Atlantis had grown soft. They sought to awaken the true flame, an untempered force buried deep beneath the ocean floor. Unseen by the Empress, they drilled beyond the mantle using forbidden crystal rigs. The earth shook beneath Dalen, but they called it progress. They wore masks of mirrored metal, their faces forgotten even to themselves. One among them, a woman named Veltara, had once been a keeper, but she had turned away from balance in search of dominion. She believed Atlantis must burn before it could evolve, and in the shadows of her lab, a tiny black flame danced, not like the core, but hungrier. Chapter 6. The Empress's Secret. Despite her calm, Empress Lysara had not slept in 3 nights. Behind the serene facade, her private chambers told a different story. Scrolls scattered, crystal orbs glowing faintly, a mirror etched with sigils in an ancient tongue. She was not simply a ruler, but the last of the moonbound, a lineage bound by oath and blood to the core crystal. Their bond gave longevity, clarity, and grace. But lately, Lysara had felt frayed. Her visions came too often and too harshly. Fire, ruin, a name whispered in every dream, Veltara. When her attendants found her at dawn, she stood barefoot on the balcony, her eyes rimmed with silver tears. Chapter 7. The Priestess in the Shadows. The mysterious woman Kalen had seen in the core chamber was no hallucination. Her name was Ceres, a wandering priestess from the forgotten Isle of Numai, cloaked in rites even the keepers had buried. She moved through Poseidar like a ghost, appearing only to those whose minds were open, unclouded by pride. Ceres found Kalen again, this time in the gardens where gravity no longer ruled and fountains flowed upward. "Your crystal burns too brightly," she told him. "When brilliance blinds, it can no longer guide." Kalen was beginning to understand. Something had shifted in Atlantis. The core was not dying, but calling, and not everyone would hear it the same way. Chapter 8. The Fractured Council. The Council of Nine, who once governed with harmony, had become a ring of unease. Arguments sparked over energy distribution, outer island unrest, and the reappearance of old symbols. One counselor, Lord Malvin, proposed that Atlantis begin crafting weapons again, not to use but to remember how. Kalen stood to speak, urging caution. "The core does not understand force. If we stray from harmony, it will not follow us." Laughter, mockery, but Empress Lysara said nothing. She merely watched him, eyes heavy with secrets. Chapter 9. crystalline sabotage. That night, a humming tower collapsed on the Isle of Keros. A silver spire, powered by the core, shattered like spun glass. No lives were lost, but the energy grid flickered across 3 isles. The keepers scrambled. The core pulsed erratically. Kalen felt it even in his sleep, an ache behind his eyes. When he investigated the wreckage, he found something strange, a splinter of black crystal embedded deep in the spire's root. It pulsed faintly, with a rhythm that didn't match any known frequency. He sealed it in a containment orb and brought it back to the temple. But someone followed him. Chapter 10. The Thorn's Hand. On Dahlan, Veltara stood before a hidden vault. Inside, dozens of fragments pulsed with the same black flame Kalen had discovered. She had stolen them from the sea floor, from where the earth itself tried to bury them. Her engineers, masked and silent, fed the fragments to artificial conduits. The black energy obeyed no will but its own. It devoured light. Veltara smiled. Let them worship balance. Let them fear the storm. I will be the storm. The first tremor rocked the coastline. Chapter 11. The Memory Chamber. Back in Poseidon, Kalen entered the Memory Chamber, an ancient vault only accessible to those touched by the core. It contained echoes, visions of the past encoded in sound and light. He watched a scene from 5 centuries ago. A young Empress Lysara kneeling before a dying queen. Guard the crystal, guard the flame, but guard most of all the rift beneath. What rift? Another echo showed the founding of Atlantis, not from the earth, but from above. Starborn vessels crashing into oceans, their engines harvested to birth the cities. Atlantis had never belonged here. It had been planted. Chapter 12. Shadows Between Stars. Cirrus waited for Kalen outside the chamber. "You see now," she said. "This place was a seed, but it grew twisted. Not by evil, by forgetting." Kalen clenched his fists. "Then we remember. We stop it." She shook her head. "Memory is not enough. The thorn has awakened something older, something that feeds." From the horizon, a strange hum rose, a sound no human throat could make. It echoed in the bones of the ocean itself. The story of Atlantis was just beginning. Chapter 13. The Cracks Beneath the Marble. The marble towers of Poseidon still gleamed, but their brilliance no longer inspired awe. To Kalen, they looked brittle now, like shells under strain. Even the air felt thinner, stretched taut by unspoken fear. People smiled, but their eyes darted like fish in shadowed waters. Inside the house of the deep flame, the core crystal pulsed with an uneven rhythm. Its light had dimmed, not to the untrained eye, but Kalen felt it like a skipped heartbeat. He had tried meditating with it, listening as before, but now its voice came fragmented, as though calling from beneath ice. Worse, something else had begun to answer. Whispers in the dark, cold thoughts that slithered behind his own. They spoke of freedom, of power. They called him by name. Chapter 14. The Masked Assembly. In a chamber hidden beneath the lowest levels of the temple, the council convened in secret. A dozen masked figures stood in a circle, robed in shimmering black and blue. Each represented one of the 10 isles, though none spoke their names aloud. High Empress Lysara stood in the center, her veil drawn, her expression unreadable. She held a scroll in her hand, wrapped in coral thread. The prophecy. "It is not time," she said quietly, though her voice trembled. "If I speak it aloud, the pattern unfolds. But if I keep it hidden, perhaps the tide may shift." An older counselor stepped forward. "And if it doesn't? If silence dooms us?" Lysara looked down at the scroll. "Then I will be remembered as the last empress who hoped." Chapter 15. The Forsaken Isle. Far to the west, the Isle of Myris had become a forbidden zone. Officially, a storm had damaged its stabilizers. In truth, something else had happened. The circle of thorns had drilled too deep. The sea had receded around Myris, drawn inward like a breath held too long. Birds flew backward in their migration. Trees bloomed black flowers. And in the center of the ruined city, a pit of obsidian light hummed like a bell no one could unring. Veltara stood at the edge of the pit, her mirrored mask cracked. She held a fragment of black crystal, no larger than a tooth. It pulsed in her hand. "The true flame is awake," she whispered, "and it is hungry." Chapter 16. The Fracture in the Flame. Kaelin watched as the core crystal flickered and went dark for 3 breaths. Panic rippled through the temple, though the acolytes covered it with ritual. When the light returned, it was different. Less golden, tinged with violet. He went to Lysara. "The core is failing. It won't answer me anymore. Something else is speaking." She looked tired. So tired. "I know," she said, "and I have not told you everything." She unwrapped the coral-threaded scroll and handed it to him. "Read." Kaelin read in silence. His hands shook. "This prophecy. It names a betrayal, a merging of flames, a death in the temple." "Yes." "And the final line? The sea will choose whom to spare." Lysara closed her eyes. "I do not know what it means, only that it is close." Chapter 17. When the Sky Split. That night, the towers of Posidar shimmered and then dimmed. One by one, their light gutters darkened, plunging the city into unnatural twilight. Over the ocean, the stars vanished. A single jagged line of red opened in the sky, not lightning, but something slower, more deliberate. A wound in the heavens, and then the sea moaned. Not a wave, not a tide, a sound, deep and mournful. Kaelin ran to the temple balcony. From there, he saw it, the ocean pulling back from the shores. Miles of reef and coral exposed like the bones of a beast. A warning. The core flared once, then cracked. Chapter 18. The Song That Faltered. The capital of Posidar had always hummed with quiet harmony. Songs embedded in the crystal towers resonated gently through the air, tuning hearts and minds to peace. But one morning, Kaelin awoke to silence. Not a peaceful hush, but a wrongness. The resonance towers did not sing. The silver rivers that ran beneath the streets flowed sluggishly. Their luminous currents dimmed. Even the birds of glass and light that nested in the sky arches had fallen still. He rushed to the core chamber. The crystal flame pulsed erratically, like a heart gripped by fear. And there, kneeling in front of it, was the Empress. Her hands hovered inches from the flame, her face pale, aged. The harmonics that had sustained her youth were failing. "It has begun," she said, her voice trembling. "The balance has been broken." Chapter 19. The Rift Beneath Dalen. Far from Posidar, deep beneath the Isle of Dallin, the circle of thorns continued their reckless digging. The forbidden drills had reached something ancient, something not meant to be touched. Veltara stood before the opening, her arms raised in triumph. She believed the molten power beneath them could be shaped, controlled, and weaponized. Her tiny black flame had grown. It now pulsed with sentience, whispering promises in a voice like cracking stone. One of her followers, a young elementalist named Theros, hesitated. "We should stop. The island is shaking." "Let it shake," Veltara said. "The old world must break for the new one to rise." But as she turned back to the pit, the flame flashed, and a tremor split the floor beneath their feet. Something vast stirred. Chapter 20. The Empress's Secret. Back in Poseidar, Kaelin confronted Empress Lysara in her high chamber. The palace walls had begun to fracture, subtle hairline cracks, but spreading. "You knew," he said. "The core showed you a vision. That's why you stopped the expansion into the outer sea. That's why you cloistered the prophets." She turned to face him. Her eyes, once shining silver, had dulled. "There is an ancient prophecy," she admitted, "one known only to the throne. It speaks of a flame divided, a tower broken, and the sea reclaiming its own. I hid it to protect hope." Kaelin clenched his fists. "You protected silence, not hope." Chapter 21. Echoes of Betrayal. A theft occurred that night. A keeper went missing, and from the core chamber, a sliver of crystal, deep violet and humming with power, was gone. The traitor was revealed to be Althar, Kaelin's mentor. In a hidden garden atop the Sky Palace, Kaelin found him. Althar's expression was wild, his robes scorched by misuse of energy. "The core no longer listens to reason," Althar said. "The flame must be reforged. You've doomed us all." Althar vanished in a burst of light, the crystal sliver with him. Chapter 22. The ocean breathes in. The next day, the tides around the central isles withdrew, not gently, not naturally. It was as if the ocean itself had inhaled. Fishermen ran screaming from dry shores. Great beasts, things long hidden beneath the deep, were exposed, writhing in confusion. And then the skies darkened, not with clouds, but with a violet shimmer pulsing from Dalen. Kaelin stood at the edge of the palace balcony and watched the horizon. A wall of water, far off, began to rise, not yet falling, just rising, like a question the world was not ready to answer. Chapter 23. The Breaking Point. The sea had always been a lover to Atlantis. It kissed her shores with waves of grace, and in return, the island gave its riches, its harmony, and its beauty. But now, the ocean had begun to pull away. It started with the tides, slow at first, then faster, as if the earth itself had grown weary of its guardians. On the southern isles, fishing boats returned empty, their nets pulled in nothing but salt water. In Poseidar, the ground shook like it was being tugged at the roots. The golden towers flickered like dying stars. It was the core. The energy that had once kept the city alive now drained away, as if something was consuming it from the inside. Kaelin knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 24. Prophecy unfolds. Kaelin had not dared tell the Empress what the core had whispered to him on that fateful day. That haunting voice had warned of a wound growing, an irreparable injury to the heart of Atlantis. But as the dark sky churned above Poseidon, Kalen knew what had to be done. He gathered the council, including Lysara, who had already hidden the truth of the prophecy from everyone for so long. "You knew," Kalen said, his voice laced with sorrow. "Didn't you? That this was coming?" Lysara's face paled, but she held her composure. "It was not meant to come to this. I tried to find another way. The prophecy had spoken of a child born of Atlantis's flame, a child whose heart was entwined with the soul of the core. That child would either save the city or seal its doom. But the Empress had chosen not to act on it, believing that harmony alone could save them. Now the prophecy was no longer something that could be ignored. Chapter 25. The Betrayer's Hand. As Kalen stood before Lysara, it was not the Empress's words that shattered the fragile calm. It was the voice of Veltara, the former keeper who had left the sanctity of the temple years ago. Her eyes glittered in the shadows, her voice cold. "You have all failed," she said, revealing the truth she had kept hidden. She had made a deal with forces darker than the ocean itself. "I have sought the true flame, the one buried deep beneath Atlantis. Only it can restore us. Only it can bring the city back to its former glory." "You," Kalen began, horrified, as Veltara stepped forward with a crystal in her palm. It was black as midnight, humming with forbidden magic. "The core is weak," Veltara said with a smirk, "and the true flame is stronger." Chapter 26. The Wound Opens. As Veltara's dark magic surged through the chamber, the ground beneath their feet trembled. The sky above them cracked open with lightning, and the waves beyond the city wall began to rise. The true cost of the magic was becoming clear. Veltara had ignited something ancient, an elemental fury from the depths of the earth itself. But as she had hoped, it was also consuming everything in its path. The heart of Atlantis was bleeding. The ocean did not simply pull away now. It began to rush back in massive walls of water. The core pulsed wildly, its energy unstable, as if it were fighting against the very magic that Veltara had unleashed. Chapter 27. The Last of Atlantis. Atlantis was dying. Kalen rushed to the temple, knowing that the final moment was near. He had to try one last thing, something he'd feared all along. The only way to stop the magic was to sever the connection between the core and the heart of Atlantis. But there was no more time. With the ocean surging up the golden steps of Poseidon, Kalen turned to face the Empress one last time. Lysara stood with her back to the rising flood, a silent tear tracing down her cheek. "I never wanted this," she whispered. I thought I could save us all." "You still can," Kalen said, his voice filled with grief. "But it's not the city you're saving anymore. It's what's left of us." And with that, the core, the true flame, and the very soul of Atlantis were consumed by the flood.